The Republicans on the Appropriations Committee have said, and we have voted against every appropriations bill because it doesn't do anything to bring down the deficit or the debt. What we have said is that we would vote for bills if we would meet the standard that would be $26 billion this year below the president's request, $16 billion below the budget committee, and $12 billion less than was actually put forward by the Senate Democratic appropriators. We believe that by saving $296 billion, $300 billion over 10 years, we can begin to bring down the enormous debt that is causing the stagnation in our economy. When I have been home talking to businesses about why they're not hiring, why the economy is not having any energy, what they say is the uncertainty, the debt that is overwhelming, the health care bill that is so costly, and the uncertainty of what kind of regulatory environment they will have. So since we have not been able to get any appropriations bills across the floor this year, we're going to be faced with a continuing resolution. And the Senate Republicans are going to stand firm that any continuing resolution continue then at the levels of last year's spending, just as we are going to continue the priorities in those bills because the Democrats have not been able to move any appropriations bills.
Thank you, Senator Hutchinson. Senator Alexander, it's a pleasure to be here to support this initiative, which the Republican appropriators on the committee have put forward. It's a reasonable initiative. It's actually a bipartisan initiative because we're essentially subscribing to the language of the Sessions-McCaskill amendment, which was voted for by numerous Democratic members and all the Republican members when it was brought up on the floor of the Senate. And as has been pointed out, it will save $296 billion. And that's what we should be doing now. We should be saving money. I mean, let's face it, we are confronting a situation where we're simply spending a lot more than we have, and we shouldn't be spending all that we are spending, and this is an attempt to address that. $296 billion is a significant amount of money. It's not small change. In fact, I was just calculating it, we could run the state of New Hampshire for almost 50 years with $296 billion. This is a big dollar item. And the leader, Harry Reid, has said that they would agree to this, and yet the Appropriations Committee still marks up from the higher numbers. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be making it clear that we're going to mark up and we're going to save this money so that we know that there's in place a firm plan to accomplish this type of savings, which is so important as we go through the appropriations process. Thank you.
We believe that the members of the Appropriations Committee have two jobs, especially in a year when Congress failed to adopt a budget. The first job is to decide how much money to spend. The second job is to decide where to spend it. So Republican appropriators unanimously agreed with the support of our entire conference that we would recommend to the Appropriations Committee that we spend $300 billion less over the next 10 years than President Obama has recommended. Now, this just applies to 30% of the budget. The discretionary spending, military and non-military, doesn't apply to emergencies, doesn't apply to entitlements. If we could save this money over the entire budget over the next 10 years, it would be $1 trillion savings. So what our purpose today is to ask the members of the Appropriations Committee to do the same thing that Senator Reid said last week he thought they should do. Senator Reid said he was in general agreement with Senator McConnell that that should be the number. We believe that there's broad bipartisan support for the number. 17 Democrats have voted for the freeze level of the Sessions-McCaskill amendment. We hope that they will do so again, and we would urge the Appropriations Committee today at its apparently final meeting in marking up bills to adopt the number that will save $300 billion over the next 10 years and take a step at reducing the huge debt. I see that my colleagues have left me to answer any they're catching planes for Austin and Boston. Yes, sir.
Given what's been going on in Republican primaries, do you think Republican leaders in the Senate will rethink their support for earmarks?
Well, Republican leaders in the Senate are going to pay careful attention to every Republican who's elected this year. And in our conference, we have different opinions about specific appropriations. For example, I voted for a moratorium for a year. I voted for a number of reforms. On the other hand, I think it's our constitutional responsibility. For example, if the Army Corps of Engineers comes to tell me that the Wolf Creek Dam is going to collapse, and there'll be 4 more feet of water in Nashville if it floods, and the president doesn't put it in the budget, then it's my job to recommend to the committee that it put it in the budget. That's an earmark. So we are working to reform earmarks, and we have different opinions within the caucus about it. Yes.
Currently last month, so you're not holding out a lot of hope for the Interior and Gardens bill?
Well, I don't know what the plan is for the interior bill. Of course, I'm on that subcommittee, but it was pulled from the markup today, apparently because the Democrats were afraid, or the leadership was afraid, that an amendment to keep the EPA from dealing with greenhouse gases might pass with bipartisan support. Mm-hmm. Sure.
The president intends to name Elizabeth Warren to a position that would not be confirmed by the Senate for the CFPB. What did you make of that special position that's been created? And it does seem that possibly another nominee is going to come along to head that agency, but for now she will be in place to put it together.
Well, I'm glad she's not the nominee. Appointing her to be in charge of the agency, even though she's not confirmed by the Senate, is just another disturbing trend in this administration of creating czars and czarinas who are unaccountable to elected representatives. Last time I checked, there were about 3 dozen of them. Now, every administration has had a few, but none at this level. And one of the great complaints of the American people this year is the lack of check and balance here. And it's our job to check and balance. A runaway Washington administration having more czarinas and czars is just another example of that.
Can you just explain briefly why you are glad she's not one?
Well, I think she represents a view. I'm sure she represents a view that's very different from mine and from most Republicans, which is the view represented by the financial regulation bill, which makes credit harder to get on Main Street. It imposes Washington decisions on local banking issues. It would put her and whoever ends up as chair of that agency into making millions of decisions that really ought to be made by the free market or by community banks. Yes?
Senator, in the Republican Tax Hike Prevention Act that you all released this week,
Is that the McConnell bill on okay.
extending the tax cuts?
Yeah.
You proposed a state tax at 35% rate for $5 million. You all don't think that with increased majorities, or possibly majorities, or at least narrower margins next year, that you'd be able to do better than that?
Well, Senator Kyle and Senator Lincoln have worked hard to come up with a compromise. And the answer to your question is we might not be able to do better than that. I was a part of the Senate when we had 55 Republican senators, and every time we'd get to 58 or 9, the Democrats would pull back a vote on the estate tax. So we have to have Democratic support in order to have a permanent fix for the estate tax, and I think Senator Kyle has done a very good job of coming up with a reasonable compromise.
And so if you all could get permanence on that by the end of the year, you would take it?
This is Senator Kyle's issue, so I don't want to speak for him, but if that would pass, I would vote for it, and my guess is that most members of the Republican conference would vote for it.
Senator?
Maybe I'll take one more and then go on. Yes.
Uh-huh. Food safety. Senator Reid said that the food safety bill is really close to going, except for Senator Coburn. Do you have any sense of whether you can get some kind of agreement with him to allow this food safety bill?
Well, that I think Senator Coburn is as he often is concerned about spending. And I'm sure that Senator Reid will be working with Senator Coburn to find a way to pay for the bill. In other words, a way to pass the bill without adding significantly to the debt or the deficit. And I imagine those discussions are going on. Up until this point, it had been Senator Feinstein, I think, who'd been holding it up. Now, I think it may be Senator Coburn's concerns.
Just on holds next week, if you have an amendment Did you vote for that?
I have yes, I've voted for it before. I don't think secret holds are the problem. I mean, most senators I know are perfectly content to brag about their holds and let everybody know who's there, and it's a prerogative of senators to provide a check and a balance, and so it regularly happens, and I've had the pleasure of being held up myself by a secret hold for 3 months when I was nominated to be United States Education Secretary 20 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.